Chapter 17 of Mag and Margaret, A Story for Girls, by Pansy. After the Storm. That August day, which began by being very bright, clouded over early, and by 10 o'clock a dreary rain was falling. The storm increased in violence until, by the middle of the afternoon, some of Mrs. Perkins's boarders said it was much more like the last of November than the last of August. The wind blew in fierce gusts, and the air had a nip in it that did really remind of November. Just before dark it was announced to Meg Jessup that the fireplace in the great parlor, which had been filled all summer with lovely dried grasses and plumy ferns, was to be cleared out and a fire laid and started. "It is perfect nonsense," said Mrs. Perkins, in caustic tones. "Nobody needs a fire in the parlor, any more than a cat needs two tails. But some of them have taken a notion that they do, and that is just as bad as though they did. Trust people who have nothing to do to get up notions that make work for others; they will do it every time." Mag Jessup was rather glad than otherwise that this bit of work had fallen to her. The parlor was full of a dusky, shadowy light made by the fading day. She could see to do her work, and yet the shadows were thickening so fast that no one who might happen to enter the room could see her very plainly, and she felt, this poor little mouse, as though it would not be possible any longer to get along without a quiet cry. Nothing that would hinder her work, nor make disturbance in any way, but just a chance to let the tears chase each other down her cheeks. All day long she had hunted in vain for such a chance. The day had been an unusually busy one, made so by the unexpected storm. Nobody in the large house had the remotest idea where his rubbers had last been left, and, as for umbrellas, the fairies seemed to have hidden them. Several children who had gone to the spring house to play had to be hurried after with wraps and cautions; and Norah, made cross by the upsetting of certain plans of hers, had wanted constant waiting on between times. The twilight and the fireplace were Mag's first helps toward solitude. While she got on her knees to lay the sticks scientifically, she let the tears have it their own way. Her tired little heart felt almost broken. "What is the use, oh, what is the use?" it kept drearily asking of her; and a mean-spirited creature that seemed to have an abode inside her kept muttering that there wasn't any use; she might as well give it all up. She wasn't the Lord's servant any more, and couldn't be. He wouldn't have her unless she would love Margaret Lancaster, and she never could, never. As for being his jewel, that was all a mistake, of course. She had thought she was, she had meant to be, but here was something he said she must do, and she couldn't. And of course he wouldn't have her for a jewel after that. With such words whispered at her all day, was it any wonder that Mag wanted to cry? She laid the fire, however, with utmost care, and swept up the hearth, then looked about for matches. The boarders were already taking supper in the dining room; in a few minutes they would be trooping in, and Mrs. Perkins had told her to be sure to have the fire going well before they came. She struck a match and showed how skillfully she had done her work by the cheerful sputter that began immediately among the kindlings, and the ruddy glow that presently filled the room with light. It showed distinctly the tears that were still slowly traveling down the little girl's cheeks. They were perfectly plain to Fred Ainsworth, who had come in the back way because of his dripping umbrella, and had at the moment stepped into the parlor door to learn what made that sudden light. Then he meant to hurry in to his belated supper. Instead, he went forward into the room. "Halloo!" he said, "what have we here? You don't say you are trying to put that fire out with tears! What a waste of water! Why, everything is soaking outside; if you could just turn it out on the road instead, it would be quenched in 2 seconds." Mag tried to laugh, this was such a funny idea. She had made a hysterical little noise that she meant for a laugh, but it sounded more like a sob. Mr. Frederick came near to her. "What is it, Mag?" he said kindly, in a changed tone. "Something very bad must have happened, I am sure. What can it be?" Whereupon Mag struggled with her tears, and overcame them, and spoke distinctly, though very low: "I can't do it, Mr. Frederick. I've got to give everything up, I suppose; and it makes me feel dreadful. I don't see how I can give up, but yet I must, of course, because I can not do it." "Nothing was ever clearer," he said, with great gravity. "Let me see if I can repeat it. I can't do it, I've got to give it up. I can't give it up, yet I must because I can't do it. Is that right? It is perfectly plain, I am sure." Then Mag really had to laugh a little; but it was only a very little. In a second she was grave. "I don't know how to tell you," she said mournfully, but by dint of much questioning she succeeded at last. "I begin to comprehend," her listener said. "You consider my cousin Margaret your enemy, and you find that you can't love her, and Miss Ordway has shown you in the Bible that in that case it is all up with you. Is that right?" Mag nodded her head. "It is a bad case," he said gravely. "I'll own that I don't think you have any great reason to love my cousin. Still I don't think she really means to be your enemy." "But she has been mean to me," said Mag earnestly, "and said mean things about me. You don't know how many, Mr. Frederick. Lora Woodruff told me all about it." "I dare say. I could find something in the Bible about Lora Woodruff, I believe, that it might do her good to see. But about your case, I think you said you were willing to pray for Margaret?" "Oh, yes, sir. I haven't, but I most know I could; and if it was only that, I would try. But there's that word love, Mr. Frederick." "I see. You don't believe in any half measures. Still, if I were you, I should try the praying. I've heard wise people say that when they prayed for persons they didn't like, the feeling they had for them changed sometimes. I don't know anything about it myself, Mag, but I heard a very good woman say that once, one who knew more about the Bible than I should if I lived 100 years." And the young fellow gave a little homesick sigh as the picture of his dear grandmother came vividly before him at that moment, with her serene old face framed in a white cap, an open Bible always on the table by her side. Mag was looking at him intently with very wide open, anxious eyes that presently changed in expression, and seemed full of wondering awe. "I never thought of that," she said slowly. "I thought I must not pray for her, because I did not love her. The love comes first in the verse. But maybe, seeing God knows just how it is, he would help me." "It is worth trying, I assure you," said Mr. Frederick, and now there was a broad smile on his face. All at once the ridiculousness of it came upon him: Miss Ordway and himself trying to explain the Bible and teach Christian duty to this child. "Physician, heal thyself," he repeated, as he went toward the dining room. If the mouse knew enough, she might quote that old proverb to us with relish. But Mag was not thinking of either of them. Her mind was full of a great and solemn thought. God, who knew her much better than Miss Ordway or Mr. Frederick did, knew that she could not make herself love Miss Margaret. And perhaps in his greatness he would find a way to help her if she only asked him. Why had she not thought of this before? I think the angels must have looked that night upon a sight to interest them. A bare little room boarded off by a very thin partition from the larger attic where others of the help slept; a room furnished only by a small cot bed, a pine box turned on its side and its top covered with newspaper, for a washstand, and ornamented with a bright tin basin and a broken nosed water pitcher; and a 3-legged stool for a seat. This was Mag Jessup's room. Beside the cot she knelt, a small figure in a dark blue calico nightgown (Mrs. Perkins made nightgowns out of old colored wrappers, because they showed soil less than white ones. The rain had ceased suddenly, and the moon was struggling with clouds, and occasionally got the better of them and filled the little room with glory; and bathed in it was the little soul that wrestled on her knees with the old problem of how to forgive one who had injured her. She did not know, poor child, how old a story it was. She thought in her ignorance that she was the first person in this great sinful world who had found it hard, even to impossibility, to do right. She did not kneel long. Children's prayers, if perfectly sincere, are always very short. Mag had not many words to say, and when they were said, she waited a minute and said the very same words again, not that she felt it was necessary, but because the repeating of them in some way comforted her. Then she laid herself down on her very short and narrow cot and fell asleep at once, for she had worked hard all day and was tired. She was awakened in the morning by a sound of voices outside her door. She recognized the voices. They were Jane's the chambermaid and the nurse girl, who assisted Margaret Lancaster's aunt in the care of the invalid. "Well, and how is she this morning?" Jane was asking. "She isn't very good, and that's a fact," was the emphatic answer. "She's as cross as two sticks. I don't know as I blame her very much, poor thing. It is awful dull for a young girl like her to be lying there day after day. She ain't used to it, you see. And last night her foot pained her a good deal. She got out of patience with it yesterday, and gave it an ugly twitch or two that made her have a hard night. I reckon she'll have a chance to learn patience, though, before she gets through. Have you heard what the doctor told her aunt yesterday?" No, Jane had heard nothing. The voices dropped a little lower, but still Mag could hear distinctly. "Why, don't you think he is afraid her foot will never be just right again. He had over some big words that I guess nobody but himself understood, but they meant that there is some kind of twist to it that they don't often get over. He said she might have to walk with a cane, or she might get so that she wouldn't need a cane, but he was afraid there would always be a limp, and I guess it would about kill her if she knew it, for she looks like a proud piece." They talked longer, but their voices sank to whispers, and Mag made no effort to hear more. She had heard enough. Poor, poor Margaret! Her heart swelled with such a sense of pity as she had never felt for any one before. Those beautiful small feet of which their owner had evidently been so proud! And now to have a twist in one of them that would not get well! Mag hopped up and began the process of washing and dressing in haste. It was still early, but she felt in a great hurry. For what? Her fingers came to a full stop as she asked herself that question and waited for the answer, and realized what it meant. She felt in a hurry to do something for Margaret Lancaster. Something to comfort her, cheer her, help her in some way. Then did she actually love her a little, after all? Oh, never mind, she did not know. Perhaps the name of it was not love, but it was named something different from what she had felt before. She must get downstairs and see if there were any asters in bloom of that queer pale color that Miss Margaret liked so much. Nobody had taken her any, and Mrs. Perkins said she did not care how many were picked, there were going to be shoals of them. She had no time for the asters, after all. Norah called to her and kept her feet running hither and thither, although she knew she was downstairs nearly half an hour earlier than usual. At last came the order to toast a slice of bread for Miss Fussy, that was Norah's name for the invalid. Never was bread more carefully toasted, and the milk to be poured over it was heated to just the point that escaped that disagreeable scum which was occasionally allowed to gather. Then Mag arranged the tray with utmost care, choosing a plate that she felt sure Miss Margaret would like, and a tiny, shell-like cup for her cocoa. When all was ready, she asked eagerly, "Norah, may I just fly out to the garden and get an aster or two for it, before I take it up?" "An aster or two!" repeated Norah in fine scorn. "Folks can't eat asters, and by Jane's tell she is cross enough this morning to throw them at your head. But I'm sure I don't care, get 'em if you want to." And Mag brought them, pale and pure and wet with dew. Her face was bright when she entered the upstairs room with her tray. "Good morning," she said cheerily. "I've brought you some lovely toast, and an egg that was laid this very morning for you, and a cup of cream for the toast." "I hate the sight of toast," said Margaret crossly. "Why don't you— Oh, there are asters! I thought I should be downstairs before they were ready. I don't believe I'm ever going downstairs. I believe that hateful old doctor is cheating me, telling me I will be better next week, and next week, and all the time he knows that I'm never going to get well." She pushed the tray from her, and burying her face in the pillow, burst into a passion of tears. Oh, poor Margaret! It was the only thought the little attendant had. Every vestige of dislike, or aversion, or indignation had gone out of her heart. She was sorry for Margaret. Yes, and she loved her. How could anybody help it, when she was sick, and felt so badly, and had a twist in her foot that perhaps never and here Mag felt a choking sensation in her throat, and was afraid that she, too, would cry. This would never do. "Won't you take a swallow of the cocoa while it is nice and hot?" she asked timidly. "And you can't think what is under this saucer. It is a surprise on purpose for you. Something that you like, I guess, ever so much." Curiosity presently got the better of tears. Margaret peeped, and found a wonderful cluster of Niagara grapes, the first of the season in that part of the world. Before she knew it, she was pressing great globes of cool sweetness between her lips, and tasting of the cream toast and delicately poached egg, and taking sips of the cocoa. And Mag, eager, alert, patient, was holding the tray at just the right angle, and keeping the napkin ready for the dainty grape-stained fingers, intent on helping Miss Margaret Lancaster to just as good a time as could possibly be secured. Chapter 18